Okay, I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone here to this retreat, this shamatha retreat, mindfulness of breathing. So this is, of course, going over 2 days, today and tomorrow. And this retreat is the first of a series of 5 retreats that we're going to cover the 3 sort of core areas of practice of mindfulness, of compassion, and wisdom. And so the first part, core element, mindfulness, or sometimes called shamatha, will have 2 weekend retreats. This is the first of those 2. The second one will be beginning of August. Then we're going to have a weekend retreat on the compassion practice. And then we'll have 2 weekend retreats on the wisdom practice or vipassana practice, the main aspects of those. So this is the first of a series of 5 retreats. So let's look at the schedule for this weekend. We're going to have the same schedule, of course, both days. And the timing is Central European summertime. We see here there's 4 sessions. Each one is 1 hour 15. The first session from 9 till 10:15. Then we'll take a 30-minute tea break. 10:45 to 12 is the second session. And then after that, we'll have a 1 hour lunch break. Those of you, of course, in Europe, I'm here in Australia, so it'll be a dinner break for me. And 2 afternoon sessions from 1 till 2:15, again, 30-minute break, and then 2:45 till 4 o'clock. Now, each of the sessions will have a very similar structure, and that is we'll typically begin the session with a guided meditation, then a presentation of a related topic, and then another guided meditation, and then at the end of the session, time for question and answer. So with that, what would be helpful is that during the presentations to switch off your webcam and your mic. And then at the time of Q&A, if you have a question, then you can switch on your mic and your webcam and ask the question then. Otherwise, it gets a bit distracting, particularly if you have your microphone on and I'm giving presentation and there's a lot of background noise. So if you'd like to switch those, both the webcam and the mics off during the session until we do the Q&A. The recommended reading for this retreat is Attention Revolution by Alan Wallace. So I'll actually be following quite closely a lot of the topics in that book. So that would be very helpful to read as an accompaniment to this retreat and also the next weekend retreat. We have some materials for this retreat that you should have already received, two charts, a diagram and then a chart, both to do with the 9 stages of progress in the shamatha practice. And we'll be using those particularly tomorrow morning, but the chart might be also useful in some of the sessions today. And we'll be video recording, of course, all of these sessions. So if you miss a session, then you can get you can watch the recording. And again, you should have been sent a link to the Google Drive containing the folder containing all the recordings. So that's a little bit of the structure for this weekend. So let's go straight to session 1 now, which is an introduction into this particular weekend retreat. And before we begin our discussions, let's do just a very short meditation, really just to relax the body, relax the mind, and to set a good motivation for this weekend retreat. So if you'd like to find a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin that. Short meditation, very short. And during the meditations, I'll switch my video off so not to distract you, particularly if you're meditating with the eyes open a little bit. So again, finding a nice, comfortable posture. And simply allowing your awareness to descend into the body. And simply become aware of sensations throughout the body. And if you notice any areas of tightness or tension in any part of the body, then use the out breath to relax and release that tightness or tension as best you can. And relaxing more deeply with each out breath. And simply allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. Not trying to control the breath in any way. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Not doing anything at all. Simply being present. Allowing the mind to come to rest. And then just think about your motivation for coming to this retreat or attending this retreat this weekend. And then try to make that motivation as expansive as possible. And try to include others in your motivation. That you're not just doing this for your own benefit, but you're doing it so you can be of more benefit to those around you. And then keeping this motivation in mind, we can end the meditation and we can begin our discussions together here today. So let's have a look at what we'll be covering in this first session. Now, this is called a shamatha retreat. So the first topic we're going to discuss is what is shamatha? And then why is this shamatha practice important? Why do we need to do it? And then how to train in shamatha. And then for the actual practice that we'll be looking at in this session is we'll be looking at how to what's called prepare body, speech, and mind. In other words, how to prepare ourselves effectively at the beginning of each meditation session. And so that's what the meditation is going to be, is really just emphasizing that preparation. And that's very important because many people don't prepare well at the beginning of meditation, and then, of course, the meditation doesn't go very well. And then, of course, some time for question answer at the end of the session. So let's begin by looking at what is shamatha. Now, shamatha itself is a Sanskrit term, and we can divide this term into two parts. The first part, shama, means calm, means a mind that's calm, that's not full of thoughts. And ta means to remain or abide. And so often this word shamatha is translated into English as calm abiding. And so what we're talking about here is not only a mind that is calm, but that's abiding, i.e. focused single-pointedly on an object. So shamatha is actually the practice of cultivating a calm, clear, and focused mind, developing single-pointed concentration. And sometimes in modern traditions, this is called mindfulness practice. And so what's the correlation between mindfulness practice and this shamatha practice? Well, actually here, mindfulness is a tool we use in the shamatha practice. And we'll look at that mindfulness, what it means and how we use it in this practice a little bit in the next session, I think. Yeah. No, the third session today, we'll be looking at mindfulness in more detail. Now, in this context of developing concentration, there's another Sanskrit term that's commonly used, and that is samadhi. And again, samadhi we can divide into the prefix sam, meaning totally, and di, meaning to place. So it really means to totally place the mind on an object. And so often the word samadhi is translated as concentration. And of course, there are many levels of concentration that we can develop. And here, in this retreat, we'll be looking at one particular level of concentration called shamatha. And this is the level of concentration that is really emphasized in what's called the Mahayana Buddhist traditions. Whereas in what's called the Theravada Buddhist traditions, when we talk about this samadhi or concentration practice, they really talk a lot more about doing these four levels of what's called jhana. So they often say we're doing jhana practice. So it's the same practice, we're just talking about slightly different levels of concentration. So again, here, shamatha is a particular level of concentration, single-pointed concentration that we are trying to attain. Now, why is shamatha practice important? Well, certainly in terms of everyday life, it's very important. And so here we begin with a quote from this recommended reading, Attention Revolution, from Alan Wallace, where he says, "Few things affect our lives more than our faculty of attention. If we can't focus our attention due to either agitation or dullness, we can't do anything well. We can't study, listen, converse with others, work, play, or even sleep well when our attention is impaired." And so if we have very poor attention skills, and I think studies show that particularly in our modern world, our attention skills are actually seem to be decreasing in every generation now. Um, then of course, if we have poor attention skills because either our mind is very dull or agitated or distracted, then we're not effective in anything we do. We tend to end up with a lot of agitation and stress, which often leads to a lot of mental imbalance. We easily get caught up in craving, attachment, and so forth. And we end up being really the slaves of our mind. We often get caught up and overwhelmed and tormented by our thoughts, emotions, and memories. And then because of a lack of attention skills, we don't really even enjoy the simple pleasures in life as much as we could. And we also end up with often sleep and even some physical health problems due to that lack of attention skills. So if we do the shamatha practice, then at a level of everyday life, and we improve our attention skills, then of course we're going to be much more effective in everything we do, much more calm mind, meaning much less agitation and stress, much better mental balance. Instead of being the slaves of our mind, we'll become the masters of our own mind. We'll enjoy the simple pleasures in life much more. And often we end up with a better quality of sleep and even some physical health benefits as well. So they are some of the benefits that we can get from doing this shamatha practice at an everyday life level. But also, of course, we can talk about why shamatha this practice is important in terms of the pursuit of happiness. And here we can begin with a quote from His Holiness Dalai Lama, who says, "I believe that the very purpose of our life is to seek happiness. Whether one believes in religion or not, whether one believes in this religion or that religion, we are all seeking something better in life. So I think the very motion of our life is towards happiness." But of course, when we talk about the pursuit of happiness, we really need to appreciate that there are at least two types of happiness. There's what's called temporal happiness, which is simply another name for our pleasurable experiences. And this type of happiness is what's called a stimulus-based happiness, meaning we have some stimulus and then because of that, we have some pleasant experience. And therefore, it's often called conditioned happiness, that we need certain conditions to come together to have these pleasant experiences. And so therefore, by its nature, this type of happiness is transient, because when the stimulus finishes, the pleasurable experience finishes. And therefore, it's unsustainable. And it's also unreliable because it requires stimulus. If there's no stimulus, there's no pleasant experience. And if we look closely at our pleasurable experiences, we'll really come to appreciate they're not really even in the nature of happiness. Because if our pleasurable experiences were in the nature of happiness, it would mean that the more we engaged in pleasant experiences, the more happy we should become. But we know from our own experience that if we overindulge in our pleasant experiences, not only don't they make us more happy, but they often tend to induce a lot of unnecessary suffering. For example, classic example, of course, eating too much of our favorite dessert. We just get indigestion. Spending too long out there in the nice warm sunshine, we just get sunburnt and dehydrated. So we can see that these pleasurable experiences are simply relative experiences. And so this type of happiness is really all about what we can get from the world. Whereas the second type of happiness, genuine happiness, or sometimes called inner well-being, is not a stimulus-based happiness, meaning that we can be in the state of inner well-being regardless of what's going on around us. And so therefore it's called unconditioned happiness. It doesn't require certain conditions to be present. And therefore, by its nature, of course, it's stable, it is sustainable, reliable, and it is in the nature of happiness. And this genuine happiness or inner well-being is more about what we can bring to the world rather than what we can get from the world. And then you may ask, well, how do we achieve this genuine happiness or inner well-being? And we're going to look at that shortly. But before we do that, just one more point here that often leads to a lot of unnecessary suffering in our life. And that is that we often tend to mistake pleasure for genuine happiness, meaning we often hope or want our pleasurable experiences to fulfill us and satisfy us and give us some sort of lasting happiness. And therefore, because of that, that leads us to have craving and attachment to these pleasant experiences. We try and hold on to them and make them last, and so they don't go away. And of course, with that craving and attachment for our pleasant experiences, together with that often comes a lot of worry and anxiety about not getting it, not getting enough of it, or potentially losing it. And then often together with that, a lot of frustration when we don't get it, overindulging when we do get it, and then of course, sometimes unnecessary suffering due to that. And then often it can lead to a lot of dissatisfaction and disappointment when things don't live up to our expectations. And then we feel the reason we're not really happy is that we just didn't get enough of that thing. And so therefore we end up craving more of it. And so it's just a sort of a vicious cycle. And then actually that craving and attachment actually leads us to stop enjoying things. And we know this well in our own life, is that if there are certain things in our life that we really enjoy quite a lot, but we get them too often, then after some time, our craving and attachment goes, oh, that's boring now. That's not good enough anymore because I want something bigger, better, and different. So craving and attachment is never satisfied. But of course, if we don't mistake pleasure for happiness, a genuine happiness, and we understand there are these two types of happiness, then we can not only strive for this genuine happiness, this state of inner well-being, but at the same time, actually enjoy our pleasurable experiences much more. Because sometimes people mistakenly think it's a choice. They think that either I enjoy pleasurable things or I abandon those things and I just try for genuine happiness. But that's a big misconception. Because if we are striving for genuine happiness, then we will really appreciate that our pleasurable experiences are never going to fulfill us and satisfy us. So we won't have unrealistic expectations. We won't be developing that craving and attachment for them, which means that when they arise, we'll actually enjoy them more fully than we do now. So actually we can have our cake and eat it as well. So it's not a choice. So what is this genuine happiness and how do we achieve it, this state of inner well-being? So here we'll begin with a quote from the Buddha who says, find out what really constitutes true well-being and based on this understanding, pursue it. And so here what we find is that in the Theravada Buddhist traditions, these are the ones based on the original scriptures or texts written in the Pali language, then we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. There are 8 practices that will lead us to this state of genuine happiness or inner well-being. Whereas in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, based on the original text written in Sanskrit, the presentation here is the 6 perfections. There are 6 perfections that we need to engage in to achieve this well-being or genuine happiness. And we won't go into those in any detail, that's beyond the context of this retreat. But what we can say is that if when we look at these 8 noble Eightfold Path and the 6 perfections, then actually in both of those presentations, we come down to the same 3 core areas of practice, 3 areas of practice that we need to engage in. And the first of those is ethics, in Sanskrit, shila. So ethics here, the core of ethics is simply avoiding harmful behavior. And then on that basis, we engage in the concentration practice, or in Sanskrit, samadhi practice, developing single-pointed concentration. So of course, that is this shamatha practice that we are looking at in this weekend's retreat. And then on that basis, we engage in the wisdom practice, or in Sanskrit, prajna. And this practice often also is referred to in Sanskrit as vipassana practice, or in the Pali, vipassana practice. And both of those terms literally mean insight, to gain insight into the nature of reality. Because the Buddhist assertion is that the underlying source of our mental afflictions and suffering is our distorted view of reality. And so that if we can come to a direct insight into the nature of reality through this wisdom practice, we can overcome all mental afflictions and all suffering, and thereby we will achieve this state of genuine happiness or inner well-being. So therefore, if we really want to find that genuine happiness or inner well-being, then we need to engage in this wisdom practice. We need to gain a direct insight into the nature of reality. But to gain a direct insight into nature of reality, we need a very calm, clear, and focused mind. We need this mind of shamatha. So we see that this shamatha practice is very important in the pursuit of happiness. That if we don't engage in shamatha practice, we're not going to achieve that goal of genuine happiness, because it's only on that basis that we can gain that insight into reality through the wisdom practice or vipassana practice. So let's now have a look at how to train in shamatha. So there's a number of things that we'll be going through in this weekend. So in shamatha training, the first thing is what's called preparation. And here preparation is really about having a framework for the shamatha training, that we really need to set up our life in such a way to have an effective framework for this shamatha training. And we're going to look at that framework. What does that look like, or begin to look at that at least, in session 7, so the third session tomorrow. And then the actual shamatha training, the actual practice. So any practice we do, any training we do, always has two parts. There's a meditative part where we're internally training, and then the second part of any training is integrating that into daily life. And in terms of meditation, doing actual meditation, then again, any meditation has two parts: preparation, how to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of a meditation session, and then the actual meditation session. So the topic and practice that we're going to do in this session is this preparation: how to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of each meditation session in terms of preparing what's called body, speech, and mind. And then in the actual meditation here, shamatha meditation, we're going to look at 4 topics in the coming sessions today. First, in the next session, we're going to look at qualities. What qualities are we trying to develop or cultivate in this training? What object should we focus on? Because remember here, shamatha training is about developing single-pointed concentration. So we're focusing on a single object, but what object should we focus on? So we'll look at that also in the next session. And then in the third session, what tools do we need to use in this practice? And also in that third session, what faults can arise in this practice and how do we overcome those faults? And then the integrating this into daily life, this practice, we're going to look at in the last session tomorrow afternoon. And then with any training, it would be helpful to have a roadmap of what is the goal and what stages do we go through on the way there, so that we can have a roadmap so we can see, are we on track? Are we going in the right direction? Are we making progress? And so we're going to look at the stages of progress in the shamatha training. We're going to look at that in the first session tomorrow morning. So that's the outline of how to train in shamatha and the various topics that we're going to look at in this retreat. So let's first look at then preparing body, speech, and mind. So this, of course, is what we do at the beginning of every meditation session. So when we talk about preparing the body, we're really talking about setting up a good posture. So here it says settling the body into a state of relaxation stillness, and vigilance. And I'd like to return to those three terms shortly. But first, let's have a look at posture. That it's important to have a good posture in meditation, because what we want to do is put the body in a state, in a posture, so that it doesn't create any interferences in our meditation. We want to be able to forget about the body. So it's important to have a good posture. So here, in particularly Tibetan Buddhism, there's a classic presentation of 7 points to address in setting up a good posture. And we'll go through them very briefly here. The first is what to do with the legs. And the ideal posture with the legs is what's called full lotus. That's where, of course, you have one foot on either thigh. So many of us, of course, in the modern world are not flexible enough to do this full lotus posture. So we end up sitting cross-legged, and that's fine as well. But some of us have knee problems, and so some alternatives to sitting cross-legged is meditation stool, a low stool where you actually tuck your legs underneath the stool. So some people use a meditation stool. Some people don't find that helpful. They can sit in a chair. So again, a chair is fine. And then also, particularly those people who have back problems and even find sitting in a chair quite painful for meditating, there's another option that we're going to look at in the last session today, and that is using the shavasana posture for meditation. That's where you lock the corpse posture from yoga, lying flat on your back. And we'll look at that posture in the last session today. Now, what to do with the hands? In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, what's usually presented is you put your right hand in your left, thumbs touching, and then you rest them in your lap. And that's symbolizing the two sort of main wings of practice of the left hand is symbolizing wisdom, the right hand is symbolizing compassion, and the thumbs touching is symbolizing to practice them together. That's the classic presentation of the hands, but if you don't find that comfortable, then you can simply rest your hands on your knees. That's fine as well. And of course, to keep the back nice and straight, because if we don't have the back straight and we're sort of leaning forward or hunched over, we're just going to fall into a lot of dullness. Shoulders just sort of level and relaxed. Here it says the head tilted slightly forward. So of course, we're not looking straight ahead. Neither are we having the head completely down, but having it at a slight angle so that if you're looking straight ahead, you're sort of looking slightly downwards actually. And then what to do with the eyes? The general recommendation in meditation is to have them slightly open, to let some light in. Because if we have them closed, we're probably going to fall into dullness. And if we have them too wide open, we get too much light, get agitated. But here I think, particularly in this as a beginner and in this sort of practice that we're doing this weekend, you can experiment because everyone's different. And for those of you who find that even having the eyes, you tend to be a sort of person that tends to naturally be more agitated, then you may find with the eyes slightly open, you may just get more agitation. Then you can experiment with the eyes slightly closed. But if you're the sort of person who more naturally tends to fall into dullness, I wouldn't recommend meditating with your eyes closed. You're just going to get dull and drowsy. So then for you, very much recommended to have them at least slightly open to let some light in. But that's something you can experiment with. And we'll talk much more about what to do with the eyes in the next retreat we do in 3 weeks' time. There's a much more discussion there. But for this weekend, as you prefer, slightly open, or if you find that you're getting very agitated still, you can have them lightly closed. And then the jaw, of course, keeping it relaxed, not clenching the teeth. And here often in the text, it talks about having the tip of your tongue against the upper palate in your mouth. And the reason for this, sometimes presented, is that sometimes if you're producing too much saliva and you're constantly swallowing, that's a bit of a distraction. So if you have the tip of your tongue touching the upper palate behind your teeth, that can reduce the amount of saliva. But of course, you don't need to do that if that's not a problem. That's just an extra thing that's mentioned. So in this 7-point posture, the two most important things is to have the back straight and then the body completely relaxed. And so that's why here it says to prepare the body, to set the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. So vigilant posture here is to keep the back straight, and relaxation. And stillness is, once we have established that posture, that comfortable posture, is to keep the body as still as possible. Because if we keep moving the body in meditation, then that's a distraction. You know, if we're scratching and itching and so forth, that's going to distract us. So once you've set up a good posture, relaxed and back straight, then keep the body as still as possible, avoiding any unnecessary movement. Of course, during the meditation, if you start to have a strong pain in your knee or something, then of course you may need to adjust your posture. Otherwise, you just get pulled by the pain. But don't unnecessarily move the body. It'll just be another distraction. So that's preparing the body. Now, preparing the speech. Here, we talk about speech. We're not talking about verbal chit-chat. We're really talking about inner speech or mental chit-chat. And in particular, sometimes when we come into meditation, not only is our mind quite active, but sometimes there's a lot of sort of negativity and agitation in the mind. And it's very hard to bring that mind into a good meditative state from quite a negative, agitated state. So sometimes it's recommended then, at this point, if you notice a lot of things going on in the mind, particularly a lot of agitation and negativity in the mind, is to do a little breathing exercise as part of the preparation. And this can take many forms. Some traditions talk about taking just 3 deep breaths. Some talk about counting 21 breaths. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they often talk about this 9-round breathing exercise, which can be quite elaborate, involving lots of visualization. But regardless of the breathing exercise you use here at this point, they all serve the same purpose. And the purpose is, by focusing on a breathing exercise, we can let go of that negativity, that mental chit-chat, and bring the mind into a neutral state. And then, of course, once we've done that breathing exercise, if we find it helpful, of course, then to simply allow the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. So in meditation, particularly here, we're not trying to control the breath. We're not trying to make the breath rhythmic or anything. Of course, there are other practices like pranayama and so forth, where we do a lot of breath manipulation. But here, in this sort of practice, such as shamatha, we're not trying to do anything with the breath. Just let the breathing do whatever it needs to do. We're not trying to make it rhythmic or subtle or whatever. Just let the breathing flow naturally and effortlessly. And then in terms of preparing the mind, really 2 things here. First, of course, setting a positive motivation. And as we saw earlier, it's always helpful in our motivation to try and include others in our motivation, to make the motivation as expansive as possible. And the second thing here is to really just let the mind come to rest in the present moment. And not, because generally in our life, we tend to live in the past and the future. Either we're jumping back into the past, remembering past experiences, or we're jumping into the future, anticipating what is going to happen or what may or may not happen. And in particular here in meditation, what's quite common is at the beginning of a meditation session, we're already jumping into the future. We're already going, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in this meditation. I hope this happens. I hope that doesn't happen. So we're full of expectations about the meditation. So if you notice any of those sorts of expectations, it's just let go of them, let go of them, let go of them. And so here then is to really just let the mind settle again into a state of relaxation, stillness, the stillness of the present moment, and the mind being clear. So once we've settled body, speech, and mind into this state, then we are ready to do the actual meditation session. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to do this meditation session of settling body, speech, and mind. And so for our meditation sessions in this retreat, we're going to do 15-minute sessions. 15 minutes, because again, we're in this weekend retreat, we are learning these practices. And I think 15 minutes is enough time to learn the practices and the various steps of the practice, get a little taste for the practice, but not too long that we can't sustain the meditation. And we'll talk a little bit more about how long to meditate. I think that comes a little bit tomorrow, is that we really always want to be emphasizing quality over quantity. We want to not try and meditate too long. And so it's often recommended as a beginner to have many short sessions. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do 15-minute sessions. So if you'd like to find a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin the meditation now. And again, here we'll go very slowly through these 3 stages of preparation, of preparing body, speech, and mind for meditation practice in general. Allowing your awareness to descend into the body, right down to the ground, and simply becoming aware of the sensations where your body is touching the cushion or the chair. And then allow your awareness to rise up and fill the entire space of your body. And simply become aware of sensations throughout the body. And if you notice any tightness or tension in any part of the body, then use the out breath to relax and release that tightness or tension. And then bringing your attention to the area of your face. And soften and relax all the muscles in the face. The mouth and jaw, soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. And in this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. and relaxing more deeply with each out breath. And now we can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations throughout the body as you breathe. And then allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. Simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And to help anchor us in that present moment, simply become aware of sensations of the breath throughout the body. Simply noticing any sensations in the body associated with the breathing. Now, if you get distracted from the breath, no need to get upset. In fact, be happy you noticed you've become distracted. And the very first thing to do is simply relax. Then gently release the distraction. And then simply return to noticing the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Simply keep coming back to the breath again and again, each time you become distracted. Patiently and happily. And so we can bring the meditation to a close. So now we've got some time for question answer. So if anyone has any questions about anything from this session, switch on your mic and your webcam and ask away. So now we've got 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. Yes, someone's got a question?
Yes, hi, my name is Mikkel. I have a short question.
Hi, Mikkel.
Hi, thank you so much for clear
Sure.
instruction.
Sure, thank
Good to
you.
meet you. Thank you. I just had I actually ventured into trying the full lotus posture. I've just recently trained yoga for it, so I succeeded. I was just wondering. I mean, in yoga, it matters what legs you have on top, whether it's like a solar or lunar aspect, you know, receptive or what do you call outward aspect.
Sure.
Which one do you recommend?
Sure.
Does it make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do full lotus myself, and again, you know, like with the sort of the parallel to that was the hands. You know, like in Tibetan Buddhism, you have the right in the left, and the left is wisdom, and the right is compassion, thumbs touching. But in some other traditions, they do the opposite. So that's sort of symbolic. But I think with the full lotus, I mean, of course, there's a lot I can say in this question, but to try and keep it brief, is the posture for us now at our level, we are trying to put this body in an optimal state for meditation. Basically, a state where it does not provide any interference. Um, Particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's a bit correlated here with yoga, I think, is that when we go venture into Tantra or Vajrayana practice, then not only are we interested in setting up this body in an optimal state, we're also, as a basis of the posture, setting up the subtle energy flow within the body in an optimal state. So these points that I mentioned, these 7 points, when you go into Tantra, they take on a much deeper, subtle meaning why you do that. But that's a little bit beyond here. We don't really, at this sort of level of practice, we don't really talk so much in Buddhism about subtle energies. That only really comes in when we jump into Tantra or Vajrayana. But just one point that may be helpful is talking to a couple of people who have used the full lotus for many years. A couple of people have commented to me is meditation is that because they've always done it one way, it actually created a problem. So what they were recommending is that if you're doing the full lotus or even what's called half lotus, swap it occasionally. Have one on the other or vice versa. Because also, maybe not the full lotus, but when you do, and I sometimes do what's sort of a half lotus, it actually is not balanced quite. And so what my experience is if I do a sort of a half lotus in a retreat setting for extended period of time without swapping over, I start to get a pain in the middle of my back next to the spine because there's a slight imbalance because one is on top of the other and your back is compensating that. And in doing short meditations, you don't notice, but my experience is always the same. If I do the half lotus, extended time, after a couple of days, my back starts to hurt in exactly the same position. And then if I swap over, then it goes away. So that's certainly something I would recommend, is that if you're doing a posture such full lotus, but particularly like half lotus or even the legs crossed, I would swap over occasionally to really find that balance. Does that help? Thank you. We've got time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has a question.
Very much. I was just happy to confirm my own intuition. So thank you very much for that.
Sure. One other thing, actually, while you're on the line, you know, sometimes people, Westerners, they see these, you know, yogis or whatever in full lotus, and then they push themselves to do the full lotus, and then they actually end up injuring themselves because they think, I have to be in full lotus to do it properly. But actually, that's not true. In fact, I saw a article not so long ago where there were, I think, 2 or 3 Zen masters who meditated sitting, I think mainly full lotus, and each one of them, about the same time, had some injury or something happen where they ended up having to sit in a chair for some extended period of time. And all 3 commented that the quality of their meditation did not suffer at all by sitting in a chair. So the advantage with something like full lotus is it's very stable. So if we can comfortably sit in that position, of course, if it's a stretch and there's pain, then we're just going to get caught up in distraction. But if we can comfortably sit there, it's very stable, very stable. But it's not like if I don't do full lotus, I'm not meditating properly. Don't have that attitude. Otherwise,
I
you're just
don't
going
think.
to damage yourself. And you may look like a yogi, but actually what's happening is you're just caught up in pain because your knees hurting because you're in full lotus. So don't want to do that.
No, I agree with you, and I've found exactly the same. Even in the other position, I usually sit with one leg in and then the other in front of it, and I
Yeah,
find
that's
even with I have to switch sometimes because otherwise I do get that imbalance in the body. So I completely
exactly.
agree, and I wouldn't do
Exactly.
it either.
So I also use that posture. Sometimes that's called the Burmese or Bodhisattva posture, where you have one, because what happens is a lot of people who do cross-legged, they get cut circulation and they get one or both legs go numb. Um, and then of course you can adjust that and that. But one option, like you said, is instead of crossing them, you have one in front of the other. And sometimes I do that, and it's exactly the same. If I have the same one in the front and behind, after a day or two, in the same place in my back, right next to my spine, is sharp pain because it's imbalanced over time. So then you switch over and then you're balanced. So swap. Very good.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. We've still got time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has any questions about anything we've covered in this session.
Hi, Glenn.
Yes,
Thanks for the first session.
sure.
I was just wondering, when settling the body, speech, and mind in its natural state, do you broaden your awareness to include sounds, sight, and thoughts, or is the attention solely focused on the breath and the tactile sensations throughout the body?
Yeah. So, I mean, the initial stage, of course, in settling the body is you're withdrawing from all the sensory field into the body. And then also, in terms of settling the speech, you're quieting the blah, 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 chit chat mind. And then in settling the mind, you're really just bringing the mind into the present moment. So ideally, you should be just in that stillness of the present moment. What I introduced there was to anchor that in the body, in the breath, because most people or many beginners in the modern world, we're all caught up in our conceptual thinking. So if you're just trying to bring the mind into the present moment, into that stillness of awareness, what often happens, of course, is almost immediately a thought happens and then off we go, off we go, off we go, off we go. So therefore, what can be helpful as part of settling the mind in its natural state as a beginner is to give it an anchor. And the breath, the body, or just the body in general, but the breath in the body is a good anchor to hold that there. So that could be helpful in the beginning stages. Otherwise, is to just, you're basically, when you've settled the mind in its natural state, you've actually withdrawn from all appearances, sensory and mental. I mean, they'll still be there, of course. I mean, there'll still be sensations in the body. There'll still be sounds happening. There's probably still thoughts coming up, but we're not paying attention to any of that. We are just resting in the stillness of awareness in the present moment. That, and then from that point, then with not engaging in any appearances, then we can direct our attention to whatever our object is of the practice, the breath, the mind, awareness, or if we're doing some other practice, direct it to that. So that is the starting point, is that stillness of the present moment. And then from there, we launch to whatever practice we do. Does that help?
Yeah, that's really helpful, Glenn. I guess I've been practicing a Sanga's method over the last 6 months, and sometimes when I'm doing the settling the body, speech, and mind, I'm not really sure what the difference is between a Sanga's method and the preparation. But,
right. Yeah. So I think the preparation would be when you've prepared the mind, is you're just resting in the present moment in awareness. Then a Sanga's method, that then on that basis, when you're ready, then you direct your attention to the body, to the breath in the body.
All right. Thanks for that clarification.
That would be the actual meditation, the beginning of the actual meditation. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've still got time for one more question, if anyone has a question.
Can you hear me all right?
Hello, Atul, is it?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I need a bit more volume.
Is it better now or no?
Or hardly, but go on. I'll try and I can see if I can hear your question.
It should be better now.
A little bit better, yeah.
Yeah. So my question, Glenn, was when I just settle into the body and mind, let's say I start by closing my eyes, but after a while I get a bit drowsy, then I open my eyes. And then after a while, I feel like shutting the eyes again. So is that all right? Or should we, because if it gets too rigid, then, it doesn't work either way. So
Sure. You're talking about during the preparation process, or actually during the meditation, the actual practice with the eyes closing and opening?
I would say in general,
In general, okay. I mean, in general, of course, the recommendation is to have them slightly open, because if you have them closed, I mean, for us, our mental association is eyes closed means sleep. So we close our eyes and the mental association goes, okay, it's time for some sleep. And so we get very drowsy. So as I mentioned earlier, I think particularly with this weekend's practice, we can be flexible in terms of having a standard approach that most suits our character. If we're the sort of person who's really highly agitated pretty well all the time, probably if the eyes open, it may be more agitation, and then lightly closed will help to reduce the agitation. But if we're the sort of person who generally tends to be quite dull, I wouldn't recommend closing the eyes. Have them slightly open, let some light in. So then sort of work out what sort of character you are, and then use that as your standard approach, and don't keep changing in the meditation, eyes open, closed, open, so forth. I would pick a standard, but again, what we can do is not be 100% rigid on that, But certainly what we don't want to do is just sort of do whatever we want to do in every meditation. I think then we're not really being the masters of our mind. Then the mind is sort of controlling us rather. So we want to be sort of in the masters of what we're wanting to do. So, I mean, I would generally recommend to have them slightly open unless you're very, very agitated. Because what you're going to find is that if you have them closed, and for many people in the beginning phase, that can be helpful because many of us in the modern world are quite agitated, and a lot of things, but just our modern society, so many people find initially that helpful. But what we find is that once you get into the practice, then then dullness starts to become an issue because the eyes are closed. So, I mean, I think we want to be working towards having the eyes at least slightly open eventually. But if, again, you can start with them lightly closed if you're very, very agitated generally. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. That's helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think we've run out of time now, so it's time for a morning tea break or an afternoon tea break, depending on what part of the world you're in. So we'll take a break now, and the next session, of course, will be at 10:45 Central European Standard Time. So that's in 30 minutes time. So see you in 30 minutes for the next session. And the next session is mindfulness breathing. We'll have a general introduction into this shamatha practice, observing, using the breath as the object. So until then, enjoy your break, and we'll see you back in